Hi guys, it's Shelly here. Welcome to my channel and thank you for joining me today. On today's video, I'll be sharing with you a full colour along in Rita Berman's Afrika book, and I'm so excited that I've finally managed to get another page in this beautiful book done. I chose a page in the Egypt section, so the desert scene page with the camel and the aeroplane sort of landing to start the travels in Africa. And I don't think I've seen many coloured versions of this page, if at all. Maybe I've come across one or two, but I don't remember them. And that's the best thing about this page, is that I was able to just basically put my own ideas, my own colour schemes to this page. And I think that's why I've been struggling to colour in this book, because first of all, it's a book on Africa, very close to my heart, and so already there's a little bit of pressure for me to make sure that I color nicely in this book, basically for me. And also I've been seeing so many colored versions of pages from this book recently. Obviously it's a beautiful book, so I'm not surprised that everyone's coloring in it, but it just made it really hard for me to tackle pages in this book. And so finally I got inspired, and I haven't seen colored versions of this page, so I said I'll better get started and jump right in before I lose that inspiration to color this page. As always, like I do nowadays, I will be dipping in and out with a voiceover every now and then, trying to explain my thought process, some techniques maybe, and I will also put the colors that I'm using up on screen and in the description box below. For this page, I will be using Faber Castell soft pastels, and for the pencils, I'll be using Faber Castell Albrecht Dürer pencils, and I think I do use them activated with water as well as dry. It's not necessary to activate them with water. If you're using Polychromos, that's absolutely fine as well. I just have the option to activate them, and so it just helps laying down a base and blending. So I will in certain areas be activating it, and in certain areas using them dry. At the end of all my pencil work, I will be using a white paint pen. I think a Posca pen is what I've used, and I will be using some Tooli art paint pens as well, and a little bit of glitter gel pens too for the embellishments, and just bring everything together at the end of my colouring. All of the supplies will be listed in the description box below, so you can organize yourself, get yourself all your materials before you get started if you are colouring along with me. So to begin with, as you guys always know, I like to try and tackle my backgrounds first, and then I start working on my foregrounds. The background is the most challenging aspect of a page for me usually, and that's what usually stops me from even starting a page. So once I've figured out a background, I try and get tucked into that page immediately, because it is a bit of a struggle for me sometimes. In this case, I decided to use soft pastels because I've really been enjoying my soft pastels recently. I don't know why, but I think it could possibly be because I have changed the tools I'm using to apply my soft pastels. So you will see me using some blending tools, which are sort of similar to tools that are being used for pan pastels as well. Before, I used to just keep it simple and use cotton pads and earbuds for small areas. But now when I've started using this sponge applicator or these sponge blending tools, I feel that the soft pastels, especially for the Faber Castell, I haven't tried it with my other soft pastels, which is the Artex brand, but with the Faber Castell brand, the soft pastels do feel like they lay down a little bit more smoother, so they don't feel as rough when you're laying it down. It feels a bit creamier. Creamier is not really the right word because it is soft pastels. They're not going to be creamy ever, but it just feels that way when you're applying it with these tools. And I feel like there's slightly less mess as well. There's still, again, always going to be mess with soft pastels, but I feel like compared to when I used my cotton pads and earbuds, there's less mess, and the blending is just a lot easier as well. So I think because of these tools, I have really been enjoying the soft pastels. And I think soft pastels are brilliant. I know they're messy, yes, but they're so beginner friendly, and also for people who are not beginners at coloring or using or doing any art. I think that you can do wonderful things with soft pastels. You can layer up really nicely. You can go really intense if you wanted. You can go really soft if you wanted. You can do some nice effects with soft pastels. They erase so easily, so they're quite, you can erase mistakes if you need to so easily, and they're so quick to apply and just cover a large area of white space with the soft pastels in such a little time. And so yeah, I think soft pastels are a brilliant medium, and I know a lot of people don't like to use them, mainly because of the messiness, but I think I do really enjoy it, and I think I'll be using it a lot more now that I have these tools. So my thought process for this particular page was sort of like a sunset or a sunrise sort of sky, and I wanted to use soft pastels because I wanted the soft effect. I did not want to use my Albrecht Dürer pencils for the background and give a very bold, intense background. I wanted it to be soft and subtle, and that's why I chose to go for the soft pastels. And it's wonderful because as you see, I've been layering it up and it's all blending really nicely, and you can just keep going at it until you're happy. But yeah, I wanted a sort of sunset, sunrise sort of effect, especially because I knew that the rest of the page was going to be a lot of yellow because of the sand dunes, and there wasn't going to be that many bright colors, although you guys know that I love my bright colors, and somehow or the other I managed to add it to my pages. And in this case, I added it to my sky. Yeah, so I really wanted to do a nice colorful sky rather than just a plain blue sky. I should have the colors I'm using up on screen. Now, if you don't have the Faber Castell soft pastels, you can use any other soft pastels. I'm just using a very light yellow, a slightly yellowy orange, and then I'm using a couple of light pinks and then a light blue. So if you have other soft pastels, you can use that. If you want to do a pencil background, you can do that, whatever you would like. But yeah, I decided to do the soft pastel background. And I don't think, if I'm not mistaken, like in my mind, I thought if I need to intensify the background, I'll go over with the pencils, but I don't think I needed that at the end of the page. When I'd put all the pencil work in, the effect of the sky was perfect. Then I decided that because I'm enjoying the soft pastels, there is so much area that is just sand dunes. I decided to use the soft pastels for basing the sand dunes as well, so that a large amount of white space again gets covered up with a base layer before I go in with pencils. So it will be quite a flat layer. I do try and put in a little bit of shadowing. So I think I used two yellows, quite a light yellow and then a slightly darker one for the shadow areas, just to cover up the white space, so that when I come in to do the pencil work, there's not as much blending that will be necessary to get rid of the white space or the whites of the paper. So yeah, I just went ahead and based, and I do tend to like using soft pastels for basing quite a lot in certain situations, and I think I do have a how I color video up on the channel on using soft pastels for basing on a Kirby Rosanne's page, actually, in Fragile World. So I lay down the soft pastels for the sand dunes as well, and then once I'm happy, I will go in with pencil. First, I'll use a mini desk vacuum cleaner to vacuum up all the excess dust or mess that has been created on the page, rather than using a brush. So I'll vacuum it all up, and then I will use an eraser to erase any areas that I do not want covered with soft pastels. So for example, the clouds, I don't want the pinks and yellows in the clouds, so I'll make sure I erase them. If there's any green in the leaves, I won't worry about that, because I'll be going over with if there's any yellows in the leaves, I won't worry about that, because I'm going to be going over with green, which will cover up yellow really easily. So it's just in certain areas I will erase off any soft pastel that has gone over the line art. Once I have done this, then it is important to spray a fixative over your page so that you don't smudge any of the soft pastels over the rest of your page again. And it's up to you whether you do this stage. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, depending on how much soft pastel I've used. So for example, in this case, because I've used it for the sand dunes, I decided to spray the page. But if I had only done the sky, I wouldn't be resting my hand over the sky that much when I'm coloring, so I may have just left it. But in this case, because pretty much the whole page has soft pastels, I'll make sure I've cleaned up the page with my eraser. Once I'm happy and there's no more soft pastels that I need to erase off, then I will spray it with Winsor & Newton Professional Fixative. It's got a very strong smell, so I recommend spraying it in a well-ventilated room or outdoors. But it works well for my pages, so that's what I use. And then the page will be ready for pencil work. Now, at this stage, before you do the spraying, if there were any extra effects you wanted to do with your soft pastels, like a bouquet effect, like erasing circles, or you wanted to do the sun rays or anything like that, you could do it at this stage before you apply your fixative. As you guys know, I've mentioned many times that I do not plan out my pages from start to finish before I start recording. Otherwise, it would take me absolutely ages, first of all, to prep a page or to plan a page, and then to actually start coloring. And then even my coloring process is quite slow, so it would take me forever to actually get a page colored. So when I know what I want to do for certain elements, then I will just get myself started, and then I'll see how the page unfolds to decide what the rest of the page is going to look like. In this case, I decided that the next thing I was going to color, once I'd done all the background soft pastel work, was the clouds. I knew that I wanted to bring in color. Like I said, I always find a way to bring in bright colors, and in this case, I decided to make the clouds a little bit more dramatic rather than just a soft white set of clouds. And so yeah, I went quite colorful with my clouds, and I think it looked wonderful. I think it worked really, really well. But I basically tried to use some of the colors that were in the sky, such as the bluish colors, and then a little bit of pinks as well. And I think the colors that I chose worked really good, and it really did give a wow factor to the page from now, even though the rest of the page hadn't been completed yet. And you'll see how it unfolds on screen. But yeah, I decided to go quite bold with the clouds, and I think it worked. And I didn't start doing the plane yet. That I kept till a little bit later because I wasn't sure about the color of the plane as of yet. Like I said, I don't plan beforehand. So I color elements, I know what colors they're going to be, and then I start seeing the rest of the page and then start figuring out what other colors are going to work. So for the clouds, I used my Albrecht Dürer pencils. I don't think I activated them with water, if I'm not mistaken. but I do a little section and I'll show it to you on screen, and then I will go off and do the rest of the clouds off screen because there were quite a few clouds on that page, so that it doesn't become repetitive for you. But what I do is I show you a little section with all the colors I'm going to use, and then for the rest of the clouds I will show you where my shadow areas are going to be, because I always tend to color from my shadow areas into the highlight areas. I don't start with my darkest shade though. I usually start with like a mid-tone shade and work up to my light shades, and then I go and deepen up my shadow areas with darker shades of pencils. So I will lay down my first color into the shadow areas just so you know where my shadows are going to be, where my highlights are going to be, and then I color the rest of the clouds off screen. And instead of using water to activate, like I said, I think I ended up using a blender pencil because I did want the clouds to look smooth. I didn't want them to have the rough sort of textured look of the paper. I wanted it to all be blended nicely. So I did go in with a Derwent blender pencil to blend it all together. You could use water if you wanted, but that will give you a more watercolor effect. It will dilute the color, and you will need to go over your pencils, your Albrecht Dürer pencils, again with the dry pencil if you want the dramatic effect. If you want a soft effect or a watercolor effect, then that's absolutely fine. Maybe a blender pen would work perfectly fine too, if you wanted to use that. But I used a Derwent blender pencil. And as I always do, I will share a screenshot of my coloring page, so that you can see each stage and where we've reached. So you could always pause it and finish off that section before we go on to the next one. hopefully you've had a look at the screenshot and you like what you see. I was really happy with how the sky and the clouds turned out. The next thing I wanted to do was start working on the sand dunes because that's such a large area of the entire page. And I knew once I get that done, there's not going to be that much more to think about for the page because there would be just the small little elements left. So yeah, I wanted to tackle the sand dunes next. I actually really struggle with colouring sand because I've seen so many different renditions of sand, not necessarily on this page or this book, but I've seen such subtle yellows of sand, more of the beige colour. I've seen some people do sand so yellow, brownish, and I always struggle to know how to colour sand or what colour to go for. But I decided to use the yellows, and I do struggle with yellows as it is, but what I tried to do was lay down, and I don't know why I did it, but I thought it would just help not look flat, but I laid down some pink, salmon pink I think it was, before I started laying down the yellows over it. And I just thought that would just lift up the yellow a little bit because, yeah, when I work with yellows and browns, sometimes it can look a little bit flat. So yeah, I did some layering first with the pink, salmon pink, and if I'm not mistaken, I feel like I remember using burnt carmine as well before I started laying down the more browny colours. And I tried to limit as much as possible the browns to the shadow areas and leave the highlight areas as the base soft pastels that we'd applied, which is such a light and soft yellow colour. So yeah, I just tried to put in shadowing in the shadow areas and try to keep the highlight areas as the base soft pastel colour. I was toying with the idea of trying to do shadows of the man and the camel, because we do have a sun in the picture and it's a very low set sun, and we could have done quite long shadows which would look really, really good and give a totally different effect to the page. However, I did not know how to do it. I didn't think I had the skill to do it. I think I could have sort of figured it out for the camel, but then I started thinking that we also have a tree there, we have bushes there. I'm going to have to, if I decide to do the shadow of the camel, I'll have to do a shadow of all the plants and trees that are there. Not necessarily the background trees and buildings, but just the foreground, the elements that are closer to us on the page. And so I decided that will make it too complicated for me. I can't just do shadows of the camel, that will look silly, and I couldn't figure out how to do shadows of everything else. So I decided to just do away with that idea. So the only shadows I was putting was to try and help with the 3D effect of the sand dunes, making certain sand dunes look like they're behind particular ones and just create that 3D effect. And I'll share the colors with you on screen again, and I'll show you where I'm laying down the colors, working as always from my shadow areas to the highlight areas, making sure I leave the highlight area as the base soft pastel. And I again start with first my pinks and then my mid-tones, and then work up to my darkest tones for the shadow areas. And once I've done that, I go ahead and do the rest of it off camera. But once again, I will show you where I'm laying down my shadow areas so that you know how I'm going to be working the rest of the sand dunes. Once again, I do not use water to activate the pencils because I didn't want a watercolor effect, and I already had a base down, so I didn't need to base and blend everything to get rid of the whites of the paper. And I don't use any blending mediums in this case, so no blender pencil either, because I didn't need a completely smooth finish for the sand dunes. So yeah, I just go ahead and use the pencils dry. from the screenshot, you will see that we've already put down so much color to this page just by targeting 3 large elements on the page. And now it's just a few smaller elements to complete to get the page done, which is less of a problem, less of a challenge. I knew I was going for quite conventional colors, other than I used for the clouds. I don't know if it's clouds or smoke. I don't think it's smoke from the aeroplane. In my mind, it was clouds all along. So other than for the clouds, I was going to use quite conventional colors. So green leaves and bushes, brown tree trunks, brown camel, the pyramids, the color they're supposed to be, buildings. I was thinking they were going to be pretty much sort of yellowish toned to fit with a desert, the feel of a desert. So yeah, I just sort of started working on the elements from the trees and the leaves. I do use a little bit of water on some of these elements just to help with the blending process of it, and then so that I'm not spending too much time just blending with dry pencils. And then I do go over with the pencils dry to make my colors more bold, the kind the effect that I like to get, so bold and intense rather than just a washed out watercolor effect. So yeah, activate the pencils on some of these elements now, and then go over with the pencils dry. Again, if you don't have Albrecht Dürer pencils, you're using Polychromos or any other pencils that are not water soluble, absolutely fine. You don't need to do the basing. It doesn't really add that much more. You just do your blending process with your pencils dry. For the leaves on the trees, and also the leaves that are sort of like in the tree that's in the foreground, the leaves that are just sort of in front of them, I went for greens, but I tried to add in a little bit of interest to them with a little bit of pink, a little bit of, I think, green gold, and I tried to use slightly different greens for the tree leaves and the other leaves just to give it a little bit of a different effect. So yeah, I just changed up the greens a little bit, but all the leaves are pretty much green, other than the little bushes that are near the man. I decided to leave that at this stage because I wasn't sure whether I wanted to do them green or I wanted to try and bring in a little bit more color to this page, because as you guys know, I like color, and I really actually struggle to use limited color palettes, especially for a page which has so many elements going on. I can sometimes use limited color palettes on pages like in Hannah Carl's on pages where there are a few elements and you can actually get away, depending on which page it is, but you can get away with using a limited palette. But in pages like this where there's a landscape, where there are scenes, I struggle with limited color palettes, and I actually like bringing in color. And so I left those little bushes at this point. I decided not to do them green, just to see whether I could bring in a different color at a later stage. Once I'd done the trees and leaves, I decided to work on the man's clothing. I wasn't 100% sure at this point what color, up until this point, what color I wanted to do the clothing. I thought I was going to bring in some bright colors, but then I decided to just keep it simple and go for white. However, with my white elements on a page, sometimes I like to add in other colors rather than just go for grays to make an element look white. And so I did add a little bit of colors, a bit of pinks, I think a little bit of purpley and blues to hopefully still make the clothing look white, but just to give it a bit more interest rather than just have grays in the white clothing. So I decided to just go for the typical white clothing, and I think I also worked on this scarf at this stage following the clothing, the headscarf, and I decided to keep that dark and went for a dark blue black sort of scarf for the headscarf. So at this stage I had roughly had in mind that I was keeping the clothing simple and I'm going to bring in bright colors for the elements that are on the camel's back. So that's where I was going to add all my color for this page, because yes, there was not many other places to add the color. At this stage, I still did not have an idea on what I wanted to do with the aeroplane. For the headscarf, I did end up using a bit of water to activate, a layer of dark indigo, and then I went over with black so that it had a little bit of interest. It wasn't just a flat black color. And I will, of course, come round to when I come to the embellishment stage to use white paint pen to cover up certain black lines. So for example, the clouds and then also the clothing that I've tried to do white to help with the look of that element being a white element. but that will come once I've finished all my pencil work. I don't do it as I go along. I just like to do all my embellishment work, my paint pen work, my glitter pen work, all of that right at the end of the page. Before I tackled the more colourful items on the back of the camel, I decided I needed to colour the camel first. I knew that it was going to be a brown colour, and so I thought I'd just first lay down that colour before I started trying to figure out what new colours I was going to add to the page. I knew it was important to make sure that the camel didn't disappear into the sand dunes because, of course, there was a lot of brown in the sand dunes as well. So I tried to choose different browns in a way to just make the camel still be natural, like a natural looking brown camel, yet try and make sure that it stands out and it doesn't just completely get camouflaged into the sand dunes. I think as a whole it did work. I did use different browns, and so the camel doesn't disappear completely, but yeah, I think when I used a bit of paint pen it may have changed a little bit, I think at the bottom of the tummy, but we'll see when we get to the embellishments phase. But at this stage with pencil work I was satisfied with what my camel looked like. Once again, working from my shadows to my highlight areas, I don't think I activated the pencils. It was quite a small area, and so it was not necessary, but I show you the pencils on screen and I go ahead and finish off colouring the camel. However, even after finishing the camel, I wasn't sure what colors I wanted to add to the page yet. So I decided to work on the buildings in the background, the buildings and the pyramids. And I wanted to keep them sort of sandy colored, to fit with the desert theme, to fit with the desert, the feel of the desert. And I didn't want them to stand out too much. They're sort of in the background. The main focus for me, I think, on this page had become the clouds with the aeroplane, the man with the camel. And so I wanted the buildings and pyramids to not bring too much attention to them, just to be there in the background. And so I just tried to use a mix of yellows and I think a little bit of orangey reds and pinks, and that's what I did to do the buildings. And then of course the pyramids, similar color to the sand dunes, but I just tried to darken them up a little bit. And the areas of the pyramids that I decided to darken up were the ones that were, or to make a little bit more darker, were the side of the pyramids that were away from the sun, because they would be in a shadow from the sunlight, the setting sunlight. And so I just tried to darken up the pyramids a little bit more than the sand dunes to try and differentiate them to the sand dunes. So yeah, again, I show that to you on screen, and you'll get an idea of it. I don't think I used any water to activate, if I'm not mistaken, but you'll see that on screen. I can't seem to remember that. Finally, I decided to start working on the colored elements on the page. So I decided I do need to add color to this page for my liking. I think some people would do a brilliant job just keeping it as limited as it is at this stage. However, I don't get satisfied when I don't see some bright colors on a page most often. So I decided to start working on adding a little bit of color. And I started with the little bushes that I'd left out at the start. I decided, yes, they're definitely not going to be green. I'm not sure how they were going to look. being a different color, but I thought it would bring a little bit of life, a little bit of color to this page. And so I decided to go for purpley pinks, using, I think I used crimson, maybe manganese violet. So bringing those kind of colors in, I thought they would work really nicely with all the yellow on the page and that they would stand out. And like I said, this is the foreground for me. So all these elements that are closest to us became a focal point for me, and of course the sky with the aeroplane and the clouds. And so bringing in some bright colors wouldn't hurt, I didn't think. So yeah, hopefully you guys like the idea. But yeah, I brought in a bit of purpley pinks for the little bushes on the front. I show how I'm going to color a few of them, sharing my shades that I'm going to use, and then I go ahead and color the rest off screen. For those of you who have watched my channel for a while and are used to my style of coloring, you will not get confused or, just question how I jump all over a page. So sometimes I'm on the top of the page, then I decide to color an element somewhere else on the page, at the bottom of the page, and I just don't finish the elements surrounding it. But you guys will be used to that, and you will know that that's how I like to color. I look for an element, I know what color I'm going to do, and I go ahead with it. And as the page unfolds, like I mentioned, as it starts to unfold in front of me, I know what colors to bring in. So following coloring the colorful bushes on the bottom, I still wasn't sure what other colors I was going to bring in. So for example, like I said, I knew the elements on the back of the camel were going to be brighter colors and different colors. But I wasn't sure yet what color it was going to be. However, I did know that the birds were going to be simple because I did not want to take away from the clouds and the colorful clouds and sky that I had done. So I decided to keep the birds very simple, and I brought in the black and white that the man's clothing was onto the birds, just to tie that in a little bit as well. Not that it needed it, but I just wanted something very subtle for the birds so that your eyes don't get drawn to it, and it doesn't take away from the wow factor of the clouds that I really liked. I've been asked by many people whether I colour from the top of the page to the bottom and how I go about doing it so I don't smudge my colours. I don't worry about that. If I'm worried about my pencil smudging, which is very rare actually, I've not noticed it happen with my Albrecht Dürers that much. Maybe softer pencils it might happen more with, but I never colour a page from, for example, the top to bottom or from left to right or anything like that. I literally just colour. Just like how I pick my pages for colouring, it depends on my mood. Even the elements on a page depends on my mood. So sometimes you'll see that I'm jumping from page to page. I have lots of whips on the go because I like to colour different elements in a particular moment. And so sometimes I'll feel like colouring the leaves on the page, or I'll decide, okay, now I want to colour fur, or I want to colour the clouds or water. So depending on my mood, I will tackle a certain element on a certain page at that point in time. Sometimes it's literally just the simple answer of, I have no idea what color something's going to be. Let's move on to something else. And this was the case here. I didn't know what other colors I was going to bring to the page. So I jumped to the top and started working on the birds. and then the sun, because that was just going to be conventional yellowy orange colors. Then I decided to tackle the plane. Now this, I was not sure what color I was going to do at all, because I'd made the sky so colorful that I did not know what color was going to work for the plane. The only thing that was first coming to my mind up until this point was that the plane should be white. But I thought that was quite boring. We already had white clothing on the page. We've got white birds on the page. And so I needed to differentiate my plane and just make it stand out a little bit more. And I don't know in hindsight whether maybe the white would have actually worked really good, but I thought adding a bit of color sort of helped. So I just decided to, yes, try and keep a large area of the plane white, but add hints of yellow, oranges and reds. And again, those are colors that I find really hard to actually work with and make look good. And you'll see me thinking as I'm doing it whether I'm using the right colors. But yeah, I just decided to go quite vibrant for the plane. And at first I wasn't sure if it worked, but I think as a whole, once I step back and look at the page, I think it worked nicely because, like I said, the clouds, the plane had become a focal point. And so I needed the plane to stand out. So yeah, I think I'm satisfied with the colors. Whether it's the right colors to have gone for or whether it was too bright, I'm not sure. You guys can let me know in the comments below what you guys think of the colors I had chosen. But yeah, I decided to go for yellows and reds and try and maintain quite a bit of white on the plane so that it didn't look completely yellow. Although when I look at it now, while I'm doing the voiceover, it does look like a taxi, American cab. Is they're usually yellow and black, aren't they? So yeah, that just gave me a giggle. finally, now that all the other pencil work was done, it was time to target the elements on the camel's back where I knew I wanted to try and bring in some more colour. And now that I could see all the other colours laid out, it was easier for me to decide what colours I wanted to bring in. I thought because of all the yellows that were on the page, we do have a bit of blue up in the sky, I decided that some turquoises would work really nicely with yellow. And so I decided to bring in a little bit of turquoises into the, I think it's like a little rug that's on the camel. And then I think I just started to see that I shouldn't add too many different colors and just work with the colors that I already have. So I brought in a bit of the purpley pinks I used in the bushes, and I started to bring in the reddish yellows, red, yellow and oranges I'd used in the plain, and a little bit of green, but slightly different greens, I think, to the leaves I had used. And just worked with colors like that to basically the rest of the colors that were already on the page to add color to those little elements on the camel's back. So the only other new color basically I decided to bring in was a bit of turquoise, and I think that worked really well because it just draws a little bit of attention to those little bits and bobs that are on the camel's back, and I really liked how that worked. And then I just needed to finish the little other bits that had not yet been coloured with pencil. So there were the stones that were on the sand and the few little grass blades that were near the camel. Again, I probably left those, I can't remember why, but at this point I probably just left those in case I was going to put a different colour, but I decided to stick to the greens for those grass blades. And that's then all the pencil work done. So hopefully you've seen the screenshot of all the pencil work completed, and now I like to go in with my embellishments. So I've chosen a selection of paint pens and glitter gel pens, and I like to do the effects at the end of a page because I do find that it brings everything to life that little bit more other than just the colors that I've laid down. So I do love to do my paint pen and glitter pen work at the end. Maybe certain illustrations, I don't always do it, but I do love doing it most of the times. So the first thing I knew was I needed to white out all the black lines on elements that I wanted to look white. So the clouds, I wanted to emphasize that they were clouds. I decided to go in with a white Posca paint pen to cover up the black lines for the clouds. And then what else? The clothing on the man was white, so I decided to cover up the black lines for that, and the birds as well, to give the white, to make it look like it's white. Before I go in with any coloured paint pens, which I tend to do quite a lot now with my Tooli art paint pens, I usually go in with my white paint pen and make sure I've covered up the black lines which I want white or I want highlighted quite brightly. So yeah, I always go in with my white paint pen first before I start using all my coloured paint pens. For the sand dunes, I wanted the highlight areas to be more highlighted, so I decided to go for the Ivory Posca pen. Now, I only have two Posca pens, the white and the Ivory. They are wonderful, and they give that little pop of highlight that we need on pages, and they work well for me. So yeah, I decided to go with the Ivory for the sand dunes, just to brighten up the highlight areas by covering up the black lines. Those were the main elements that I definitely needed the black lines to be covered up for. For the other elements, then I start going in with my Tooli art paint pens, and this is not necessary, it's just an effect I like to do, but I go in and I just cover up black lines for certain elements on certain parts of it. So I don't cover up all the black lines, but just to give a bit of highlight to certain elements. So I work with a few colors of Tooli art paint pens to give the highlights that I like in certain areas. And then after I've done all my paint pen work is when I go in and start working with metallic paint pens or gel pens, and my glitter pens as well. So once I've done the paint pen work, I then go in and start doing all my glitter and shine on my pages. And in this case, there wasn't that much that I needed to do, but I did add a little bit of gold effects on the sand dunes, for example, just to give that little bit of sparkle when I flip my pages. It's not going to show up in a photo, but I'll see that little sparkle when I turn the pages. I put it on the leaves a little bit, and some elements which I've left white, tiny elements like the tassels on the rug. I think it was the rug on the camel. I put glitter there just to give little areas of sparkle and shine, basically. And yeah, I think that's about it. So that's the page completed. So I'm going to leave you guys in peace to watch the rest of the embellishment work. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I thoroughly enjoyed coloring this page, and sorry it's taken me a while to actually get it out to you. I finished it quite a while ago, but it's just been I found it a bit difficult to find a chance to do the voiceover, and I know you guys like a little bit of chat in my color alongs, and so it's the voiceover part that just slowed down me getting this page out to you guys. But hopefully it was worth the wait. I loved this page. This is only my second page done in this book, but both of them are available as color alongs, so that's really good. And hopefully I get around to doing another page soon. I don't want to give this book too big a break because again I will struggle getting back into it. But I am so glad I colored this page because I'm actually really happy with how it has turned out. And I hope you guys are happy with how it's turned out too, especially if you're following along. And like I always say, if you do follow along, make sure you share it with me, your completed page with me, whether it's by email, whether it's on Instagram. I love seeing your completed pages too. It's nice to see that there's other people coloring along with me, even if it's just a bit of inspiration you've got from me and you've done the page your own way, that's absolutely fine. I just love seeing your work too. So yeah, tag me, share it with me, and I will definitely have a look and leave a comment for you. So I'll leave you guys to this, and hopefully I'll be back with you guys again soon. So until then, take care. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one. Bye bye.